I still remember that moment as if it were a burst of lightning, 100 words that seared themselves into my memory and left me breathless with disbelief. At my ex's wedding, in the midst of elegant decor and soft, celebratory music, she casually laughed at my life. Her eyes danced with mischief and superiority as if mocking every struggle I'd endured. I stood there in the background, numb and invisible, until an unexpected voice cut through the laughter. Her new husband, with a calm authority that silenced the room, spoke up, "I think you underestimate the worth of someone who's overcome more than you could ever imagine." In that electrifying moment, everything began to change. I had always believed that my life was my own story, a story filled with hard work, determination, and a resilience carved out of years of struggle. I'd faced countless setbacks and risen each time, clinging fiercely to the belief that my worth was defined by my perseverance. Yet, as I attended her wedding, I was forced to confront a harsh reality. The woman I once loved, now my ex, had chosen to revel in my misfortunes. Her laughter was not a moment of shared joy or even a friendly tease. It was a cruel dismissal of the hardships that had shaped me. I felt exposed, as if every scar and every sacrifice had been laid bare for the world to see. The laughter of her guests, mingled with the clinking of glasses and soft murmurs of approval, only deepened the sting, making me question if I had ever truly been seen or valued. As the evening unfolded, I drifted like a shadow at the edge of the celebration. I observed her with a detached curiosity, her smile, her effortless grace, and the way she seemed to command the attention of everyone in the room. I wondered if that laughter was a final parting shot, a way to erase the pain of our past, to reduce all my struggles to mere punchlines. My heart pounded in my chest as I replayed every memory, the long nights of hardship, the countless times I'd fought to prove my worth, and every small victory that I had earned with blood, sweat, and tears. I had always believed that those experiences, as painful as they were, would someday be the very fuel that propelled me toward greatness. Then, as if the universe had conspired to deliver a twist in my tale, her new husband stood and addressed the gathering. His words were calm yet potent, filled with an unexpected depth that resonated through the hushed silence. "We all have stories," he said, his voice steady and unwavering, "and sometimes the greatest strength comes from overcoming the very challenges that seem to break us." I watched, stunned, as the room fell silent. His gaze swept over the guests and lingered on me for a moment that felt like an eternity, as though he recognized the silent agony behind my eyes. In that split second, everything shifted. The mocking laughter, the shallow comments, even the weight of my own insecurities began to crumble beneath the power of his unexpected kindness. That moment, when his voice pierced through the darkness of my despair, ignited something within me. I felt a flicker of hope, a quiet, stubborn determination to reclaim my narrative and prove that my struggles were not a weakness, but a testament to my resilience. I began to wonder if perhaps this was my chance for redemption, a moment to rise from the ashes of my past and forge a future defined not by the derision of my ex but by my own strength. The rest of the evening was a blur. I spent most of it on the periphery, watching as conversations resumed and laughter returned to the room, yet that single, unexpected intervention by her new husband kept echoing in my mind. I couldn't shake the image of his sincere, compassionate gaze directed at me, as if he understood the depth of my pain even without a word. His statement, so simple and yet so profound, planted a seed of possibility. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I dared to imagine that my life could be more than the sum of all my misfortunes. After the reception ended and the wedding guests began to depart, I walked out into the cool night air, the festive lights of the venue fading behind me like the remnants of a dream. I felt a complex mix of emotions, sorrow for the love that had been lost, anger at the callous dismissal of my struggles, and a growing determination to redefine my future. I recalled the countless nights I had spent toiling away at every obstacle thrown my way, each failure building the foundation for future success. I had endured hardship and rejection, and though the wounds were fresh, I began to see that they could also be the impetus for transformation. In the solitude of my walk home, I let my mind wander back to the moment when her new husband had spoken. His words had stirred something inside me, a realization that I was not alone in my suffering and that my value was not dictated by those who had belittled my life. I recalled the countless times I had picked myself up after falling, the fierce battles I had fought against every setback, and the resilience that had carried me through even the darkest moments. I resolved that I would honor that resilience by reclaiming my narrative. I would channel my pain into something productive, a new beginning that was mine to define. That night, once I returned to the quiet of my apartment, I sat at my desk and opened an old journal. With a trembling hand, I began to write. I recorded every detail of the evening, the sting of my ex's laughter, the unexpected kindness of her new husband, the cascade of emotions that had flooded me in the aftermath. As the ink flowed across the paper, I felt a sense of catharsis that was both painful and liberating. I wrote about the years of struggle, the battles I had fought in silence, and the moment I had felt truly seen by someone who, despite my bitter history, had recognized my worth. I vowed then that I would not allow this moment, this cruel juxtaposition of betrayal and unexpected hope, to be the final chapter of my story. Instead, it would be the spark that ignited a journey of self-discovery and transformation. I lay awake that night, the journal open before me, as I contemplated what the future might hold. The path ahead was uncertain and fraught with challenges, but I felt an ember of determination growing within me, a determination to rebuild my life, to pursue my dreams with renewed vigor, and to prove that my worth was not defined by the laughter of my ex or the indifference of those who had once held power over me. In that quiet darkness, I whispered a promise to myself: I will rise from this pain. I will take control of my destiny and craft a future that celebrates my strength, my resilience, and my true self. And so, as dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink, I took my first steps toward a future reimagined, a future where I would no longer be confined by the scars of betrayal, but instead, use them as the foundation for a new beginning. I was ready to reclaim my identity, to redefine my worth, and to build a life that was entirely my own, a life that would shine with the brilliance of a phoenix rising from the ashes of a shattered past. In the weeks after that terrible night, when the echoes of violence and betrayal still haunted the corners of our home, I found myself caught in a relentless maelstrom of conflicting emotions. Every day was a struggle between the raw shock of what had happened and the slow, painful process of understanding its deeper meaning. The memory of my husband's assault, a moment when his anger, ignited by his mother's venomous words, erupted uncontrollably, was seared into my mind. Yet, what struck me most wasn't just the violence, but the moment that followed, the way his rage dissolved into utter devastation as he stared at his own reflection, as if the mirror had forced him to confront the truth about himself. I spent long hours alone in the dim light of our living room, the space heavy with silence and unspoken sorrow. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes of that night, his raised hand, the sound of impact, and then the crushing pause when he caught sight of the man he'd become. It was as if the mirror, cold, unyielding, and brutally honest, revealed every hidden flaw, every suppressed insecurity that had festered in his soul. That image, that look of profound regret etched on his face, haunted me. I couldn't shake the feeling that, in that moment of involuntary self-confrontation, he had witnessed a truth he had long denied, that beneath the layers of anger and pride lay a deep-seated failure, a man who had hurt the one person he claimed to love. Every day after, I wandered through our empty rooms with a heavy heart, feeling the weight of memories that once brought comfort now twisting into bitter reminders of what had been lost. I sat on the edge of our bed, tracing the faded patterns of the quilt we'd chosen together, and let my mind replay the night's events in agonizing detail. I asked myself countless questions. Had I failed to see the warning signs? Could our love have been saved if we had been more honest with each other? And what of him? Could he ever come to terms with the man he'd seen in that mirror? Each question drove me deeper into a well of introspection that was as dark as it was unyielding. In an attempt to make sense of the chaos, I turned to writing, a form of silent therapy that had once comforted me during my loneliest moments. I filled page after page of my journal with my rawest thoughts, the sting of betrayal, the bitter taste of regret, and the overwhelming sorrow that now defined my days. Yet as I wrote, something unexpected began to emerge amid the sorrow, a subtle, persistent spark of defiance. I found that the more I exposed my pain to the unforgiving light of truth, the more I could see the outlines of my own resilience. I began to realize that his devastation, as haunting as it was, wasn't solely his burden to bear. It was a reflection of a shared collapse, a moment when both our worlds had crumbled under the weight of long-suppressed truths. Late one rain-soaked evening, I sat by the window of our quiet apartment, the steady drumming of rain on the glass a mournful counterpoint to my racing thoughts. I remembered the shock in his eyes, the moment he had looked at his reflection, and I saw the raw terror and regret that followed his violent act. I wondered if, in that single, shattering instant, he had recognized not only the monster he had become but also the deep, unspoken sorrow that had been building between us for years. It was as if the mirror had become a portal, forcing him to confront everything he had hidden behind his bluster, his fear of inadequacy, the quiet despair of a man who had lost his way, and the guilt that came from hurting someone who had loved him unconditionally. That night, I resolved to seek answers, not only for myself but for both of us. I reached out to my therapist, Dr. Elena Martin, whose steady guidance had always helped me navigate the darkest depths of my emotions. In our next session, I recounted the night's events in painstaking detail, every harsh word, every violent impulse, and the crushing moment when his eyes met his own in that unforgiving mirror. Sometimes, Dr. Martin said gently, when we are forced to confront the truth of our own reflection, it is the catalyst for profound change. What he saw was not just his anger, but the shadow of a life lived in denial. And sometimes, that realization is the first step toward healing. Her words, soothing yet incisive, resonated deeply with me, igniting in me a quiet determination to help both of us move forward, even if it meant facing uncomfortable truths. As the days turned into weeks, I began a slow, painful process of reckoning with our shattered past. I spent long evenings talking with him in the quiet of our living room, conversations filled with tears, pauses, and tentative attempts at understanding. I asked him what he had seen in that mirror, gently, trying to peel away the layers of pain until we reached the raw truth beneath. In hesitant, broken whispers, he confessed that he had seen a man overwhelmed by his own failures, a man who had let anger and resentment build up until it exploded in a moment of violence. I saw the ghost of who I once was, he admitted, his voice choked with sorrow. I saw someone I no longer recognize, someone who hurt the person I love most. His words, painful and heavy with regret, echoed in the silence that followed. It was a conversation that neither of us wanted to have, yet it was necessary, a painful acknowledgement that our love had been marred by unspoken resentments and a legacy of personal demons. In that heart-wrenching exchange, I felt both compassion and a fierce need to protect myself. I realized that while his outburst had been inexcusable, it was also a symptom of deeper wounds, wounds that had festered in our relationship for years. I began to understand that the violence was not an isolated incident but a manifestation of the unresolved pain we had both carried for so long. It was a wake-up call, a harsh and sudden reminder that if we were to ever heal, we would need to confront not only our shared history but also the parts of ourselves we had hidden away. I resolved then that I would no longer be defined solely by the pain of that night, but by the steps I took to reclaim my own identity. Determined to forge a path toward healing, I started to rebuild my inner strength. I revisited old hobbies that once brought me joy, listening to music that stirred the soul, reading books that offered solace in difficult times, and writing poetry that allowed me to express my innermost thoughts. Each act of creativity was a small victory, a declaration that I was still here, still capable of beauty and resilience, despite the scars of the past. I even began to share snippets of my journey on a private blog, where others who had experienced similar betrayals reached out with words of encouragement and shared their own stories of redemption. Their voices, echoing through the digital space, affirmed that I was not alone in my struggle, that pain, as profound as it could be, was often the prelude to a new beginning. As the autumn days shortened and the chill of winter began to set in, the slow process of healing continued. I learned to accept that while I might never fully forget the night my husband's rage was tempered by the horror of his own reflection, I could choose to let that moment propel me toward a future defined by growth and self-empowerment. I committed to daily practices of mindfulness and self-compassion. Each meditation session, each quiet moment of reflection was a step toward reclaiming my inner peace. I made a vow to honor my emotions without letting them control me, to allow myself to feel the full spectrum of pain and hope, and to transform every tear into a building block for the new self I was determined to create. By the time I sat down at my desk one crisp winter evening, I felt a subtle but undeniable shift within me. The raw pain of those tumultuous days had not disappeared, but it had begun to soften, replaced by a quiet, persistent determination. I opened my journal once more, this time to write not just about the betrayal and the violence, but about the resilience that was emerging from the depths of my despair. I penned lines that spoke of the journey ahead, a journey of self-discovery, forgiveness, and a reinvention that promised a future where I would no longer be defined by the actions of others. I wrote of the small, steady steps I was taking to reclaim my worth, of the hope that had started to bloom even in the harsh winter of my emotions. In those words, I found a promise, that I would rebuild my life on my own terms, that every scar would be a testament to my strength, and that every moment of darkness was merely a prelude to the dawn of a new beginning. I vowed to confront the past, to learn from it, and to use it as the foundation for a future that celebrated not only my survival but also the boundless potential of my own spirit. And so, as I closed my journal that night, with the faint glow of streetlights casting long shadows on the pavement outside, I knew that the journey was far from over. There were still challenges to face, secrets to unravel, and painful truths to confront. Yet, in that quiet, determined moment, I embraced the belief that I was capable of rising above the depths of betrayal. Every step I took from that night forward would be a step toward reclaiming my destiny, a destiny that was, ultimately, mine to shape. I woke on a chilly winter morning with an unyielding determination burning in my chest, a stark contrast to the hollow despair of months past. Every fiber of my being trembled with anticipation as I prepared to confront the people who had stolen not only my hard-earned money but also a piece of my very identity. I had spent years watching every dollar I earned vanish into their greedy hands, each paycheck a reminder that I was treated as nothing more than free labor. Today, I would reclaim my worth and my future, and nothing would stand in my way. For too long, my parents had controlled my life with an iron grip, demanding every cent of my earnings under the guise of family support while dismissing my dreams of independence. Their actions had seeped into every corner of my existence, eroding my self-respect and leaving me questioning if I was ever truly valued for who I was. I had endured years of silent suffering, each sacrifice a bitter trade-off for the illusion of familial love. But the day had come when I could no longer tolerate their exploitation. I was ready to confront them head-on and demand the freedom I deserved. The confrontation was set for that very morning. I drove to their mansion, a sprawling, ostentatious reminder of the privileges they afforded themselves, my heart pounding like a war drum as I gripped the folder filled with every transaction, every bank statement that documented the countless dollars taken from me. Every page in that folder was a testament to my hard work, a painful ledger of betrayal that had fueled my resolve to take back control of my life. When I arrived, the imposing front door swung open, and there they were, my parents, standing in the grand foyer as if their lives had not been built on the exploitation of my youth. My father's eyes widened in surprise at the sight of me. My mother's expression was unreadable, a mixture of apprehension and something I couldn't quite decipher. I took a deep breath and stepped forward. "I'm here to talk," I said, my voice steady but resolute. "I deserve an explanation, and I demand what is rightfully mine." They ushered me into a formal sitting room, the decor lavish yet cold, much like the facade they had maintained for years. I placed the folder on the polished oak table and began to speak, my words deliberate and unflinching. "Every dollar I've earned, every paycheck that I worked so hard to secure, has been taken without my consent. I trusted you to support me, but instead, you have controlled my life, treating me as if I were nothing more than free labor." The room fell silent as I recounted the months of exploitation, my voice rising with every detail, every figure that underscored my loss. My father cleared his throat, his face hardening as he attempted to justify his actions. "We did what we thought was best for the family," he said, his tone defensive yet tinged with regret. "We provided for you, and you were free to use your money for your needs when the time was right." But I could see the cracks in his veneer, the unwillingness to admit that his actions had cost me more than just financial independence. "For years," I continued, "I was denied the opportunity to build my own future. Every sacrifice I made, every extra hour at work, was not rewarded as a step toward independence but was instead funneled into a pool that I had no say over." My words, fueled by years of pent-up anger and sorrow, filled the room, echoing off the elegant walls. My mother's eyes filled with tears as she attempted to speak, but I cut her off gently. "I'm not here to cast blame without seeking accountability. I'm here to reclaim my self-worth. I have documentation, proof of every dollar taken, every mismanaged account. I demand that you return what is rightfully mine and agree to a transparent system for my future earnings." The silence that followed was deafening, punctuated only by the occasional creak of the old house settling. For a long, agonizing moment, I saw the realization dawning on them, an acknowledgement that the life they had meticulously constructed on my hard work was unsustainable, that they had crossed a line that could not be undone with empty platitudes. My father's expression softened, if only slightly, as he finally spoke in a subdued voice. We never intended to hurt you," he murmured, his eyes downcast. "It was always about keeping the family together, ensuring stability." But I could no longer accept that explanation. "Stability?" I repeated, my tone laced with bitter irony. "Stability should not come at the cost of my dreams, my independence, my dignity." I laid out the documents one by one, each figure a testament to my years of exploitation. "I want a full accounting of every transaction, and I want the funds returned to me. And going forward, I demand that you respect my right to earn and save for my own future." The tension in the room was palpable as my parents exchanged glances, an unspoken conflict playing out in the furrows of their brows. It was then that my father sighed, a long, weary sound that seemed to carry the weight of decades of unspoken regrets. "Perhaps we were wrong," he said quietly, and for the first time, I saw a glimmer of remorse in his eyes. My mother, too, reached out, her hand trembling as she attempted to bridge the gap. "We thought we were protecting you, keeping you safe," she whispered, her voice broken with sorrow. But I had spent too many years living under their control to allow their apologies to mend what had been shattered. "Protection is not the same as control," I said, my voice firm despite the ache in my chest. "I deserve to live my life, to decide for myself how to use what I earn. I am an adult, and I demand the freedom to build my own future." The words, though harsh, were imbued with the strength of a woman who had finally discovered her own voice. What followed was a long, arduous negotiation, a painful but necessary confrontation that laid bare every injustice, every stolen opportunity. My parents eventually agreed to return a portion of the funds and to establish a new arrangement that allowed me full control over my own earnings. It wasn't an immediate, complete victory, but it was a start, a first step in reclaiming the life that had been so callously taken from me. In the weeks and months that followed, I poured every ounce of my energy into rebuilding not only my finances but also my sense of self. I enrolled in courses to educate myself further on personal finance and investments, determined to ensure that I would never again be taken advantage of. Every new piece of knowledge, every small financial victory, became a brick in the foundation of my newfound independence. I began to see that while the betrayal had left scars, it had also awakened a resilience in me, a fierce determination to rise above the exploitation and to build a future defined by my own choices. I also made a conscious effort to reconnect with the parts of myself that had been suppressed for so long. I returned to old hobbies, reread books that had inspired me in my youth, and even took up writing as a way to process the tumultuous emotions swirling inside me. My journal filled with raw, honest reflections, each page a testament to the journey from despair to empowerment. I shared snippets of my story on a private blog, and the outpouring of support from strangers who had faced similar struggles was both humbling and healing. Their words affirmed that I was not alone, that my pain, as deep as it ran, was also a beacon for others seeking the strength to overcome their own betrayals. Slowly, I began to forge a new identity for myself, one that was not defined by the theft of my earnings or the control of my parents, but by my own vision and resilience. I started to dream again, of a life where I could travel, invest in my passions, and build a career that was entirely my own. The fire that had been kindled in that painful confrontation grew into a blazing determination, propelling me toward a future where I was the architect of my own destiny. Now, as I stand on the threshold of this reimagined future, I feel a profound sense of empowerment. The wounds of the past, though they will always be a part of me, no longer dictate my present or my future. I have reclaimed my independence, not only by securing my finances but by rediscovering the boundless potential within myself. I have learned that betrayal, as painful as it is, can be the catalyst for extraordinary transformation, a call to rise, to rebuild, and to redefine who we are. Every day, I am reminded that my worth is not measured by the dollars that were taken from me, but by the strength, courage, and creativity I summon to overcome every obstacle. My journey has taught me that true independence comes from within, that no one can take away the power to shape my own destiny. And so, with a heart still scarred but filled with a quiet, unyielding hope, I step boldly into the future, a future that I will build one determined step at a time, celebrating every victory as a testament to my reclaimed worth.